What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Vine and Branches podcast. We're super excited that y'all are listening. We hope you're having a great day, and if not, hopefully we can make it a little bit better. I'm back with Gabe. He's back from Alaska. He's been gone for too long, and today we have a special episode with his brother, Elijah Neal, and we're going to get to see, and he's going to share us some stories of his life and his testimony, and it's going to be super powerful. Elijah, are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm excited to be here.
Before we start, I want Gabe to give us a rundown of Alaska and how that was.
If anybody has the opportunity to go, do it. It was an insane trip. From the beginning to end, we worked some, and then we also went fishing. I caught a halibut, caught some king salmon. I got to fly a plane over a glacier. I mean, amazing trip overall. So it was such a blessing and a blast. So definitely go check it out. The scenery there is like breathtaking. Like, I took so many photos, but the photos don't even do it justice. So
Super awesome, bro. Well, we're glad to have you back. Bryce was a great guest. We loved having him on. Super powerful testimony. And we're about to get another one from Elijah Neal. And so, Elijah, just kind of to start off, I want you to just kind of introduce yourself, kind of talk about your upbringing and, you know, how your life started, I guess.
Yeah. So I was born here in Texas. This is where I'm from, but I grew up in China. I don't know how much you guys have talked about where we grew up, but I was raised in a Christian home. Grew up overseas. We spent probably 8 years in China, kind of back and forth, not consecutively. And I'm currently going to school in Missouri at College of the Ozarks. I just finished my second year, so I got 2 more years, halfway. So yeah, that's a kind of a pretty quick synopsis of my life so far, but do you have any specific questions?
What are you majoring in at the Ozarks right now?
I'm currently studying computer science and mathematics.
What do you plan to be?
I don't know yet. I've got some options. I've considered going to grad school, so getting a master's or a PhD in math so I can teach college level math later on. I enjoy programming, so something with that I think I would enjoy. And I've also looked into actuarial science, if you're familiar, which is actuarial science kind of brings in a lot of math and computer science and some of those fields for like risk prediction and management kind of a thing. So actuaries make pretty good money, and it's kind of brings in some of the fields that I'm interested in. So that's another option, but I'm not entirely sure yet.
Fair enough. I don't know either. But yeah.
You got time.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're a nerd, first of all.
Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah,
majoring in mathematics.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, and I want you to kind of elaborate on that a little bit. And can you talk about how mathematics and learning like all these different rules and principles kind of like helps your perception of like who God is and how infinite He is, and how like math all ties into God's grace and His glory?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say math is probably one of the most objective systems that we have. It sort of is logic, and I like to think of God is logic. Math and logic and kind of the laws of this universe that He's created, that logic comes from Him. And so understanding math, I think, is is really interesting. There's a lot of beauty to be found in math, which sounds weird to say. Not all math is beautiful, but there is a lot of beauty to be found in math and in the ways that it connects. A lot of times people will make some sort of mathematic discovery, and then years later somebody else will figure out that, oh, this equation or this number or whatever it may be has a really profound application to the real world. It perfectly describes something about the world, or how to calculate things like that. And so learning about the ways that math connects, there's a lot of really interesting connections between different parts of math, and I find it really interesting. I think math is, how would I explain it? It's not really. This is an interesting discussion. I don't know if you've ever considered, like, is math created or discovered? And
yeah, and that's kind of what I'm kind of getting to immediately off the bat. Yeah.
Right.
But
and so I would definitely say math is discovered. It's not. It's too perfect and too logical and interconnected to be created by us. I think it's something that's innate. Now, you could argue that math, the way that we describe math, like the numbers that we use and the symbols and all of those things, we created those symbols. But the things that math describes, or that we use math to describe, are very much, I would say, discovered. They're innate. They're not something that we came up with. So, yeah, it's pretty fascinating. I mean, infinity is kind of, I think you touched on that a little bit. Infinity is insane. I mean, when you think about it, can be proven that there are more real numbers between 0 and 1 than there are natural numbers. So think of natural numbers being the numbers that you can count to. So like 1, 2, 3, all the way up to infinity. And then real numbers being like fractions and decimals and stuff. There are more real numbers between 0 and 1 than there are whole numbers that you can count up to. And that sounds like, they're both infinity, right? How is that possible? Like, it's infinity, right? But if you think of the way that this was proven, and this is really nerdy, but if you think of a list, a numbered list of all the natural numbers. So we'll start at 1. So 1, 2, 3, it's a numbered list that goes on for like to infinity. It's an infinitely numbered list. And each number on the list has a real number between 0 and 1 like on the list. So if you think of these real numbers are listed out numerically. So they're mapped, each natural number has a real number between 0 and 1 next to it that goes on. And what you can do is, if you start with the first digit of the first number and you change it by 1. If it's an 8 or a 9, you subtract 1. And if it's less than 8, you add 1. And then you go to the second digit of the second number. You do that again. And then the third digit of the third number. And you do that all the way down this infinite list. And then you take each of those digits that you've modified from each of the numbers on the list, and you put them all together. The first digit becomes the first digit of this new number. And you do that, and you will come up with a number that is not on the list. But it's an infinite list. So all of the natural numbers are already mapped to a real number, but you can find a number that's not on the list.
That is super nerdy. Oh my goodness.
Isn't that crazy though?
That is wild.
Like, the fact that even though it's infinity, there's different sizes of infinity.
That kind of just blew my mind, and I didn't understand that hardly at all.
I was trying to follow still. Like I was like mentally trying to.
It's easier to understand if you can see it. It's kind of hard to imagine in your head, but yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of wild.
I had something to share about this dude. So there was a day I'm in class, and I get to learning in math about this crazy new thing. And I'm not going to lie, it was the first thing maybe in math that I was like, dude, I kind of love this. That was really cool. Because I'm not a huge math dude. But I come home and I go, Mom, have you ever heard of Fibonacci numbers? No, she hasn't. So I explained it to her. Super cool. And you can look at everything around you in the nature and see it, right? So then I asked my dad, have you heard of Fibonacci numbers? No. Oh, wow, that's cool. So then I'm thinking, do I know something about math that other people don't? This is crazy. So I can't remember if I texted or I called you. Did I call you or text you?
I don't remember. I think you
texted
texted me. Yeah.
So I texted him. I go, hey, Elijah, have you ever heard of Fibonacci numbers? And he goes, yeah, why? And I was like, I had just learned about them today, so I was just wondering. And he goes, they're pretty interesting, aren't they? I was like, are you kidding me? Of course this dude knows about Fibonacci numbers.
What can I say? They are pretty interesting, though.
Yeah, I was introduced to Fibonacci numbers by Gabe, so
Okay, yeah.
he was very exuberant about it. He was very glad that he knew what a Fibonacci number was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's very cool. Yeah,
It is. They are.
So, would you say though that like learning math and majoring in math has like grown your faith in God and just how like, crazy like an infinity is and how,
Yeah. One interesting thing that I was talking to one of my math professors about is this idea that even math, a system that is incredibly logical and it just works. It's kind of the I'm blanking on the word, but it's essentially like the golden rule. Like everything that is objective, it is truth. It is logic. It just kind of is there. It doesn't change, right? Even a system like that has you can. I couldn't really walk you through how this works, but you can, with any system in math, you can prove that there are things that you can't prove. Any system of math is built upon what are called axioms, which are things that we can't prove that we assume that allow us to use that system of math. Now, what's interesting is like if you alter your system, the system that you're using, things that were not provable before might become provable, but there will always be things that you will never be able to prove, and you can prove that, which is weird. But the reason, kind of the way that applies to Christianity, I would say, is even in a system, like even math takes sort of like a leap of faith. Even using math, we are taking a step of faith. Like we're going to assume that this is true, and we're going to use it, and it allows us to do all these really amazing things. And so with Christianity, it's like sometimes we have to take a step of faith, things that we know that we can't. It makes me think of, I think it's Ecclesiastes when he talks about like there are certain things about God that we will never be able to understand. And we have to just trust in him and take that step of faith, and then that allows us to do a lot of really amazing things. And so that's kind of an interesting way that kind of understanding math has informed my walk a little bit, is realizing that even in math, you have to, even in science, even in these things that are supposed to be objective and provable and hard, fast facts, even those things require faith in things that we can't show or don't really understand, right? So
yeah, I love that. I love the parallel of like the most logical thing that we have requires faith. And
Right.
how like that parallels with God, and like how when we take that step of faith, it's so logical to him, but to us, it's like, I don't really understand this right now.
Yeah.
But when you take that step, it's like, oh, well, that's why.
Right.
And so I love how that's kind of like portrayed, and that's why I believe that it was discovered too. Math was discovered, and all these things is just because like nobody can think of an infinity. Like it's so hard to process an infinity in your head. It's so hard to process eternity somewhere in your head. Me and Gabe have talked about this before, but eternity in anywhere is scary.
Yeah.
In the sense of like being in one place for forever.
It's hard to
outside
grasp.
Of time.
Yeah.
It's hard to grasp because we really don't have a hold on something that is eternal or is infinite. And so the closest thing we have is math, and it requires faith.
Yeah.
I think that's a great parallel.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I thought that was super cool.
And to go back, maybe something that I just realized that makes the discussion we were talking about, like numbers between 0 and 1, different sizes of infinity, something that might make it a little bit easier to conceptualize is think about with the natural numbers, you start counting at 1 and then you can count up to infinity. With real numbers between 0 and 1, where would you start counting? You can just keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Yeah. Where do you start? And then by the same token, where do you stop? You could just keep getting smaller or like closer and closer and closer to 1 and never actually get there. So that's maybe that makes a little bit more sense. It's still kind of like, what? But
no, it's still a little fuzzy, but
yeah.
It's less fuzzy.
Yeah.
There we go.
So
something I wanted to share. We were talking about eternity, and I don't remember if I read this quote on the podcast with you or if I even read it to you. But I had this quote from my paper, and it's by C.S. Lewis, and it says this: "Another difficulty we get if we believe God to be in time is this. Everyone who believes in God at all believes that he knows what you and I are going to do tomorrow. But if he knows what I'm going to do, so-and-so, how can I be free to do otherwise?" Well, here once again, the difficulty comes from thinking that God is progressing along the timeline with us. The only difference being that he can see ahead and we cannot. Well, if that were true, if God foresaw our acts, it would be very hard to understand how we could be free not to do them. But suppose God is outside of time and above the timeline. In that case, what we call tomorrow is visible to him in just the same way as what we call today. All the days are now for him. He does not remember you doing yesterday. He simply sees you doing them, because though you have lost yesterday, he has not. He does not foresee you doing things tomorrow. He simply sees you doing them, because though tomorrow is not yet there for you, it is for him. You never suppose that your actions at this moment were any less free because God knows what you are doing. Well, he knows your tomorrow's actions in just the same way, because he is already in tomorrow and can simply watch you. In a sense, he does not know your action till you have done it. But then the moment at which you have done it, it is already now for him.
Yeah. C.S. Lewis is such a profound... the way that he breaks things down is so great, I think.
It's so like... It's like the most crayon eater you can get. And still, I have to go back and reread it.
Yeah.
Over and over to try to like comprehend it.
He makes it so, I would say, accessible. The way that he breaks it down, it's like, why didn't I think of it that way?
Yeah.
But it's like it's so clear.
Dude is brilliant.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I love his writings, for sure.
Yeah. I was trying to read Mere Christianity, and I had to like reread everything. Once, twice, three times,
It's really good, though. I need to reread that.
Yeah. And I kind of, as you were talking about that quote, I've always heard that, like, the only important dates to God in, like, this life is, like, when you give your life to him and then when you die. And so it's, like, kind of on that kind of track of thinking of, like, he's outside of time, so he doesn't really see time like we do. And so really the only two decisions that matter to him is like, did he choose me or did he not? And like, obviously God knows when we're going to go, but those are the only 2 dates that we should really like put really a whole lot of thought into, you know, like, and realize that, oh, God can see outside of time, but we can't. So we got to make the most of it while we're here. And so I kind of like that perspective of, oh, God is outside of time. Doesn't mean that he's controlling you necessarily. It doesn't mean you're a puppet or anything, but that God is outside of time and we need to make the most of our time because we can't see. We're not outside of time.
Right.
So I like that perspective of it.
It's interesting to think about. Sometimes I wonder, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but I wonder, is God omnipresent because he can actually be everywhere at once? Or does he just appear that way to us? Can he move through time in such a way and interact with us each individually in such a way that to us, he appears to be everywhere at once, but to him, he's interacting with you individually? Does that make sense?
That is an interesting, argument. The verse that comes to me is like the verse that says God is spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, like, I think, when we as Christians, like a lot of times if you're in the church, you'll say like, oh, the Spirit of God fell, or, the Spirit of God is moving or whatever. It's almost like they see it as like a mist or something. Like, it's like almost like a fog. A fog can be in one place, but like it can also leave and then it goes up. And
Right.
so it's kind of like we kind of refer to it as that, but also like we say, oh, God is everywhere. And so that is an interesting point. I don't know if I've ever really dove too far into that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things where does it really make a difference?
Right. It
Not
doesn't
really,
matter
but
to
it's
your
interesting to
salvation.
ponder. Yeah.
But it's cool.
It's interesting to
theological
think about.
point.
Yeah, for sure.
Where would you fall on that?
I don't know. I kind of like the idea that he is able to he interacts with each of us individually, but because he's outside of time, it appears to us that he's everywhere at once. But again, practically speaking, to us, he's everywhere at once, whether he is to him, like, it doesn't really make a difference to
Right.
practically speaking. So I don't know if that's how it works, but it's an interesting thought.
When I think of it, I would honestly think he could do either one if he wanted to do whichever one he wanted to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like maybe he does one at one time and one another. I don't know.
I suppose he's not really constrained. I mean,
Yeah, it's kind of like a who says he can't.
Yeah.
kind of thing, right?
Yeah, right.
It's like who's gonna tell him he can't do both or
Yeah.
you know, but,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I had a question for you.
Okay.
I just graduated high school.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, a lot of other people are.
Fake school.
Yeah, I was homeschooled.
Well,
So I just graduated, and for all the other people that have graduated and going to college or whatever else they're doing, whether they're not going to college or whatever, what is one thing or one piece of advice you would give to somebody moving on in this next step of life?
I might have to chew on that one. That one's like advice or something that I wish I would have known, or like kind of this same. I guess that's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, whatever you want to share.
I guess it's kind of cliche, but just embrace it. I would say. I mean, I'm already 2 years in, and it doesn't really seem possible that I'm already halfway through college. I don't feel like I've been gone for that long. So just embrace it and live it. Don't get out there and live. Because there's a lot of opportunities that you have right out of high school that you probably won't ever have again once you get out. Once you get out of college, if you're deciding to go to college, and so that's one thing. is to just embrace it, and I would say don't look back seems a little harsh, maybe. Like, it's okay to reminisce or to miss home or whatever if you're leaving home, but don't let that stop you from living, right? And so and then
While you're thinking on that,
yeah.
there was something that C.S. Lewis, I was reading in Music Christianity, that he said kind of about that, where the thing about looking back and, like, longing for things that we had or things that we did. And sometimes I find myself in that same kind of thinking and that same kind of mindset. And what he was saying was, like, we got to let those feelings go, because those might be the things holding us back from, like, new things that we can kind of step into, that he's waiting for us to step into.
Yeah.
And so, like, you got to be able to let go of that and then be ready to embrace the new thing that you're stepping into, or the new, whatever you're losing. God's going to give you something better, and you got to let go of the old thing and step into the new. And that's kind of, I think high school to college is kind of symbolic of that. I mean, because you're, like, moving away, you're moving from, your house sometimes, and sometimes away from your family, and so you're kind of stepping out of your comfort zone, out of the nest a little bit, and you're having to leave behind some things, but also step into this new and exciting, chapter of freedom and of figuring it out on your own. And so, I thought that was super cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. I got another question for you. You ready?
Shoot.
What is your favorite hymn? No, I'm kidding.
I mean,
okay. Well, actually, you are a big music person. So I do want to hear about, last night we were talking about it at youth. You're in a band at college and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to him and I was like, yeah, even last night I thought about this. I was like, well, why do we sing and play music at church? Well, obviously because music is a gift from God.
Absolutely.
We didn't come up with it on our own,
right,
and stuff. And so I wanted to hear a little bit about music and what that's been like in your life.
So, like, what influence music has had in my life, that kind of a thing?
Yeah. And what instruments you play, about a little bit about your band, things like that.
Okay, all right. So I mostly play bass guitar is kind of what I play the most of. But I dabble with piano, and I played violin a long time ago. But
and mandolin, and he's played a little bit of guitar, and he's also played a couple of times some harmonica.
Harmonica?
You could label him as a jack of all trades.
I don't know. You should meet one of my bandmates. He's insane. He brought an accordion to school.
An accordion.
Wow. And he actually, like, accordions, you know how a lot of times accordions are like, ooh, like you hear it and it's like, ugh. He makes it sound good. Like, who is this guy? He's jacked. Like literally jacked. He can play the accordion. He can play the keyboard. He can play the guitar. He just recently got like an old Mustang from like the late 60s. It's insane. Like, who is this guy? Like, why is he? His name is Judah.
Shout out to Judah.
Yeah, right. Like, who is this guy? I don't know. What the heck?
Bro's living life to the full.
Right? It's insane. Anyway,
worse sounding, something worse than, what was it? What was the
accordion?
Instrument? Accordion. Worse, bagpipe.
So, I play bass for a group of guys back at school. We've got, so I'm on bass. I got a buddy on drums. We got 2 guitar players, and then my buddy Judah on keys. He left to join the National Guard, serve his country, something stupid like that. And so he's been gone for a year. He'll be back in the fall. But
crazy excuse.
Yeah, right. What the heck? Who does that? But so we've had 4 guys for the last year since Judah left, but we'll have 5 when he's back in the fall. And so that's been a lot of fun. We all lived in the basement of the freshman dorm on campus. We all lived in the basement, not in the same room, but so that's kind of how we got connected. So we call our band the Basement Boys because, why not? And
is there an album coming out soon?
that would be nice. We don't have we would have to find a place to record, and we don't really have that, but they have I think last year they started doing, I think they had done it before, but they stopped for a while, but they started doing what's called Battle of the Bands again. They started it last year. So we went and competed in Battle of the Bands and won because we're just too good.
Cash prize?
Yes, actually. We got $500, $100 each. It was
pretty good for a college student.
Pretty solid. And so we got to open for a concert. I don't know if you've heard of Jordy Searcy. He's kind of a smaller indie musician. He was touring, and he made a stop at the school. And because we won Battle of the Bands, we got to open for him, which was a lot of fun. And then we went to Battle of the Bands again this year, and there was actually like twice as many bands. Last year there were 4 bands total, I think. This year there were 8. And that was a lot of fun. We didn't win this year. I think the band that won, they kind of did. I mean, like, fair play. I think they deserved the win. They did pretty well. But it was still a lot of fun. And so that has been a great way to connect with my bandmates, and so that was a lot of fun. Music is just kind of, I don't know. I love music. I love listening to music. I love playing music. I don't get to play all that often, unfortunately. But I think music really is a gift, kind of like you were saying. I find it to be very centering at times, and it's a very powerful thing. And so it's been a pretty big part of my life, even just listening to music and that kind of a thing.
So kind of staying on this music topic,
okay,
I kind of want you to kind of dive into how the devil uses music, because like you said, it speaks to people. And
yeah.
There's been I've seen interviews of people where, they ask him, would you rather go your whole life without ever seeing a movie again, or never listening to music again?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, dude, I could never do it without music.
Yeah.
And so kind of talk about that impact and how the devil tries to use the music space.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think music is a very powerful thing, and it does speak to people. And so I definitely think that music can influence negatively, and that what we feed ourselves musically can definitely have a negative impact. And I definitely think that that the devil does use those sorts of things to affect us and to kind of get that foothold. I think it's interesting. I think music is, because some people I think are of the opinion that listening to music that secular music is, I know people who don't really listen to secular music because they feel that it's better for them to just listen to more Christian music. I don't personally have that sort of conviction. I think it kind of goes back to the idea that when Paul talks about, certain things are sin for some people have convictions about certain things that other people don't. And C.S. Lewis does a really good job of kind of articulating, I think it's in Mere Christianity, I want to say, when he talks about some people have convictions about certain things that other people don't, and that's perfectly fine. I think the moment that we start looking down at other people for having convictions about those things is when it becomes a problem. Some people may see fit to avoid drinking, or like kind of what C.S. Lewis talks about is like some people may be like, I'm not going to drink, I'm not going to go to the cinema, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. There's nothing inherently wrong with those things, but some people may be convicted to not do those things, and that's fine. For me, secular music in itself, so long as the message isn't really negative, is not like convicting for me, I guess. But I try to avoid like profanity in music, because I find that if I feed myself that sort of thing, I can find myself starting to talk more like that over time, and I don't really want to do that, so I do try to avoid that. But that to say that feeding yourself those sorts of things, feeding, I guess, what is it from, what verse is it that says, from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks.
Yeah.
And so if you're constantly feeding your heart profanity, for example, then eventually I think it'll start to seep out. And so you do have to be careful with that sort of thing, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. Like when you listen to it a lot and then you're walking into your room and you stub your toe on the bed frame, if you listen to it a lot, you just want to, scream.
That's something not so nice. Yeah.
Not so nice.
Mm-hmm.
So on that, just to get to know you a little bit better, what's your favorite artist?
That's a really tough question. Favorite artist, like of all time, or like what have I been listening to a lot lately?
Both.
Both?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I would say the two artists that come to mind in terms of I think it's interesting. I don't know if you guys have found this. I find that it's really hard to find artists that you can listen to a lot of their music. You'll maybe find a song or two, and then you go listen to more of their music, and it's like, it's all right. But I feel like it's harder to find an artist where you listen to all of their stuff, and it's like, oh, this is all good. Like, I like most of this, right?
I would almost disagree. I'm a huge NF fan, and I have listened to every single song at least 100 times.
Well, I know you have.
Let's tell the audience, Gabe, what percent of listeners were you on your Spotify Wrapped that 1 year?
So Spotify Wrapped 1 year, I was in the top 0.0. Was that another zero? I want to say it was 0.005% of his top listeners. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But what I'm saying is, like, it's hard to find artists like that. I find. I think I listen to a lot of different artists, and it's not very often that I go through and listen to an artist's more of their discography and find, I actually like a lot of their stuff, if that makes sense.
Like, for you, it's more like you find a song and you're like, oh, I like the song. It's not you find an artist and you go, oh, I like the artist.
Yeah. There have been the reason I say that is like the two artists that come to mind that I really like a lot of their music, it would be Steely Dan and James Taylor. Those are two artists that I've listened to a lot of their stuff. But lately, I've been listening to a lot more 90s, I think, is what I've been listening to a lot lately. 90s rock, and some of that kind of goes back to some of that stuff. You got to be kind of careful with what you listen to. I try to avoid, like, for example, Green Day, for example. They have some good songs, but a lot of their songs are like, you gotta stay away from that, right? But Third Eye Blind has some good songs. Pearl Jam. Those are a few of them. I also I listen to kind of a lot of different stuff. I also really like to listen to instrumental stuff, like fingerstyle guitars is the kind of the genre. It's acoustic guitar, instrumental, and they're using their fingers to pluck the strings, and that you can get some really crazy. Like, some people are incredibly talented, and it's insane. I like to listen to a lot of that stuff as well. So I don't know. A lot of different. It's kind of random, but Dylan Reich is one of the guitar players that I've been listening to. Yeah.
You're a big oldies guy.
Yeah. I think the probably 80% of what I listen to is. What was that?
So the other day, this is way off topic. Squirrel.
Yeah.
The other day I was at work and this baby goat was getting out. Anyways, it bit me. And I was looking, and I was going, where was the scab? Which finger was it?
See, I thought this whole time, I think you're like giving us a sign, like, stop.
To stop, because I'm holding my fingers up. Like,
yeah.
My
like, okay.
No, I was looking for a scab because the goat bit me, and anyways.
That's funny. Where was I? I totally
I don't know. I was going to tell you
I
that.
don't know. Oh,
you're
yeah.
an oldie guy.
I was saying, I think 80% of what I listen to is pre-2000. Like I said, lately I've been listening to a lot of 90s, but I think my favorite decade in the past, I listened to a lot of 70s. 70s is probably my favorite. 80s is pretty solid. Like I said, lately I've been listening to a lot of 90s. So most of what I listen to is pre-2000, but yeah. So
quick little plug to Josh Garrels. That's who me and Gabe have been listening to.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
What kind of music does he play?
It's kind of an acoustic-y.
That music video.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a Christian. What would you call it? Folk or?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes
like
sense.
a soothing, just kind of like vibe.
Kind of on the level of Luke Bauer, kind of a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. He seems. I haven't really listened to much of his stuff but what I heard from when you were playing it the other day, he sounds pretty good.
And secular wise, he's kind of similar to, in my mind, sort of similar to Jack Johnson, which I love.
Yeah, Jack Johnson's pretty good. Yeah, I like Jack Johnson. For sure.
Well, moving away from music, let's get into your testimony a little bit.
Ooh.
Okay. So tell me, like, where you started, like, kind of in your walk with God. Kind of just take me back to the beginning of when you started to want a relationship with Jesus for yourself. Just kind of walk us what it was like before, walking into it, kind of what your mind was.
Yeah.
And then after it, just kind of maybe like some trials and tribulations and things that you had to overcome, some mountains of faith that you had to climb, and like, you know, just kind of, we'll just kind of ask some more questions based off of what you say. But
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
there.
I mean, like I said before, I was raised in a Christian home. Parents were missionaries. So I was like saved. I asked Jesus into my heart, you know, that whole thing when I was maybe 4 years old. And then I wasn't baptized until I think I was 10 maybe, but so I was, I guess you could say I gave my life to Jesus at a pretty young age. There was never really a time in my life when I didn't really know about Jesus or know who he was. But I would say that my relationship didn't really become personal until later. I would say in terms of the kind of leading up to my leading up to being saved, there's really not much there to talk about. But afterwards, in terms of kind of trials and that kind of thing that you were talking about, when we moved back from China for the last time, I would have been 12, almost 13. And that transition was super tough. It triggered a lot of anxiety in me, and a lot of which led to a lot of like OCD type behavior. A lot of I washed my hands all the time. Like, it was bad. And that affected me in a lot of ways, and that was something that I had to overcome, and thank God with it took a while, but with God's help and with kind of just pushing through, I was able to overcome that. And so that was a big part of my story, is kind of overcoming that. But in terms of my relationship with God, I mean, that definitely brought me closer to him. I think learning to trust him in that. And but I don't know that there's really a lot of, I haven't had a lot of like serious like times where I was not, like, I didn't want anything to do with God, or those sorts of experiences. I've never had a lot of that, but I have had a lot of, I do find that I have a lot of times where I wonder if God is, not if he's listening, but if he, like, I wonder why he's not acting. I find a lot of times that I trust God. I know he's there. I know he can. But I sometimes struggle with like, will he? You know, because I sometimes I look back at my life and I think, you know, there were times that I prayed for certain things and I didn't get the answers that I wanted, and so sometimes I struggle with taking things to God, because I'm like, oh well, he hasn't always done it in the past. What makes me think he's going to this time? Not that he can't, but I mean, or I struggle with, you know, why isn't he? Why I feel like I'm praying for wisdom in this area and to make this decision, or I'm praying for this thing to happen, and I'm not seeing it happen, and so I'm like, oh, well, why is this not happening? And so I struggle with that sometimes, but I wouldn't say that I've had that there have really been times in my life where I've doubted God's existence or his love. More just questioned his methods, I guess. That sounds weird to say, but kind of question, like, well, why is he doing things this way? Or why isn't he doing this? Like, why does it feel like he's not doing this at all, right? That has been, like, wondering if my prayers are actually getting me anywhere is something that I sometimes struggle with. But, yeah.
Yeah, so let's kind of dig into that a little bit.
All right.
So I feel like sometimes I feel the same way, and sometimes I doubt God's sovereignty.
Yeah.
And how he's holding everything together, like, and that he's like the glue to everything in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I doubt his timing on things. Sometimes I doubt his like wisdom on things, and I think that I know better than he does.
Yeah.
And so, talk me how you kind of get through that, like, almost disconnect with God of like, not that like he doesn't care, like we know that he cares, but
Yeah.
it's almost like doesn't like matter enough to him.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Exactly. I definitely struggle with that, and it's still something that I struggle with. I mean, I don't know that I have gotten all the way through that struggle, and to be honest with you, I don't think that's something that you ever really stop struggling with, because sometimes he has plans that we can't see, and it's hard to trust in that when we can't see that. And so I don't necessarily think that is a struggle that will ever completely go away. But I think something that helps is just realizing that he does care, and just kind of coming to a place where you realize he cares and he loves you and he knows. And maybe you're not seeing what he's doing yet, but just kind of letting it go and just, okay, God, you know what? This is not going the way that I want it to, but I trust you, and I'm going to do my best not to worry about it and to give that to you. And just resting in that and not carrying it so much, I think, helps sometimes.
Totally agree. I think something I try to do a lot is I try to step outside of my like thinking.
Yeah.
I try to step outside of my way of thinking, and I try to think like almost as if I were God, like looking out. Like I know that his plan is better for me, and that I don't completely understand it all the time. I don't always know why he does things a certain way.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ever understand that. But
Right.
what I can like hold on to is that he has good plans. And so I try to step outside of my way of thinking of like, oh, this has to happen, or I'm not going to get through, or this has to, I need to get wisdom here, or I'm not going to be able to do whatever.
Yeah.
And I try to step outside of it, and then I go back. I always end up going back to the Word, because if I believe that the Word is the ultimate truth, then like it'll change my thinking from the inside out.
Yeah.
And so I guess just kind of talk to me how like your Bible kind of helps you navigate through those trials. And
yeah, I mean, to be completely honest with you, I think I could use, or I could stand to dig into the Word a little bit more than I do. But I mean, I guess you could argue that we all could. But
100%.
I think that one of the I was reading Proverbs, and people talk about Proverbs 3:5 a lot, to trust in the Lord with all your heart and to not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. And that's a really good reminder when struggling with that. But I also think it's important to the next two verses, 7 and 8. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. I think it's really easy for me personally, I don't know about you, but to be wise in my own eyes, and to think that I can figure it out, and think that my ability, my critical thinking is somehow superior to God's.
To the one who gave it to you.
Yeah, exactly. Like somehow I think I can think it through and figure it out in my head, and I end up just confusing myself and getting kind of stuck. And so I think that's a really important to remind myself of, is to not lean so hard on myself and my own thinking and my own understanding, and to not be wise in my own eyes, and to recognize that I can't always figure it out myself, you know.
For sure.
So
I like to Also, I think feelings are great servants, but they're not very good masters. And so if I get
Agree.
into ever feeling like, oh, God's not doing something, and I get, kind of annoyed
Yeah.
almost, like, that's not a good place to be.
Right.
And so a lot of times, I've got to realize that I've got to trust God above my thoughts and my feelings. And
Yeah.
I've got to, and it brings me back to the verse that says, like, the wisdom of man is nowhere in comparison to the foolishness of God.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, when you put that into perspective,
Yeah.
it's like,
Think about that for a second. Oof.
well, I'm going to set my ideas aside. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
And so, yeah, no, I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah, for sure.
I kind of want to dig in. You said, like, earlier how when you need wisdom in a certain area, and sometimes he doesn't always give it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go back to the verse in my mind where it says, like, ask for wisdom in faith, and he gives it generously.
Yeah.
And it's like, but you have to seek with no doubting. And
Yeah.
so how do you think that you personally, because obviously it's not like the same for everybody.
Sure.
But how do you seek God for wisdom and like without no doubting? Like, how do you feel like you run to God for wisdom?
I don't know. To be honest with you, that's something. I think that's one of the things that I struggle with the most, is because I find myself wanting to make wise decisions and make the decisions that are best for me and the people around me. And so I seek God for wisdom a lot. I'm like, okay, God, I'm trying to make this decision. I don't really know what to do here. Give me wisdom. But I struggle a lot with, like, having that faith, believing that it's going to happen. It's more of like, okay, well, God, if you want to give me wisdom, I'll take it, rather than like that. It's really tough to not have that little doubt in the back of my head, because it's really easy to think about all the times that I've asked for wisdom and felt like nothing has changed, even though the reality is maybe God hasn't answered things in the way that I wanted to, but he has answered my prayers before. But it's really easy to look at all the times that he hasn't and be like, oh, well, what makes me think that he's going to this time? And so having that, like, asking in faith and not having that doubt I think is tough. Let's see if I can find, is that James?
I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's in chapter 1,
Chapter
verse
1.
5.
Oh yeah, there it is. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith with no doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He's a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. Yeah.
We got to go out and, prepare that field when we pray.
Yeah. Yeah. Believe that it's going to happen. Yeah.
And do you ever think that there's a time, I don't know if this is like true or not. This is just a thought that I'm having.
Yeah, go for it.
But do you ever think that there's a time where we ask God for wisdom and he's already given us the wisdom, like, beforehand? Like, we don't need any more, but he just hasn't revealed this, whatever it is, like, the situation yet. Like, not necessarily that we don't have the wisdom to deal with whatever, but it's just like the pieces haven't fully aligned yet.
Yeah.
Because
we don't have all the information yet.
Yes, because I think a lot of times I hear stories of, like, especially like people who like need a tuition, like they need a check or whatever, and it comes like with 40 minutes left, or it comes like with 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
And it's always like, wow, like, and these people are asking God for this need that they have.
Yeah.
They need wisdom about it. Like, how am I going to get this?
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily that they don't know what to do with the money when they get it.
Yeah.
But it's just like the pieces haven't fallen into our lap yet.
Yeah.
Like he hasn't necessarily provided it yet.
Yeah. And it kind of makes me think of going back to Proverbs, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and kind of this idea that, or I've heard some versions say that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and so the wisest thing that we can do is to trust God and to lean into Him and not on ourselves, right? Lean not on your own understanding, sort of a thing. And so I think that it definitely is. There are times in which we are asking for something that we don't necessarily need. Like God has already, like you're saying, God has already provided us the wisdom. We just don't have all the pieces yet. Or maybe there are times, sometimes it's kind of scary to me to think about, like, what if there are times where I know what I need to do, but I'm not really willing to accept it. And so I pray, like, okay, God, and then like I'm hoping that He's gonna tell me that it's okay to do this thing that I know I shouldn't. And that's a tough one. But I don't know how often that is the case. That's an interesting, like, how often do we actually need God to give us more wisdom, and how often do we just need to trust Him, right?
Yeah. I just think that a lot of times when I try to run to God for wisdom, a lot of times it's not like this automatic download of,
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I'm not a computer. Like, I don't get a download of
right.
wisdom or whatever. But, I mean, I think a lot of times I find it from almost not even Him just, like, giving it to me. Yes, He's giving it to me. It's such a blessing. But it's almost like I have to choose to, like, trust Him and lean into Him.
Yeah.
Like, when I choose to lean into Him more, when I have to get into His Word to know what He says about a certain subject or a certain thing,
right?
That's where I find my wisdom. Like, that's how He speaks to me.
Yeah.
It's never really where I feel this, like, audible voice, or I automatically, like, the right way is highlighted. Like, it's always,
yeah,
I'm still relying off of my intuition, and like, I'm growing in my wisdom because I'm leaning into Him and I'm leaning into the Word.
Yeah.
But it's not always like this is what you're going to do, or
yeah. As much as I wish it was, it's usually not.
Yeah. Would be nice.
Right? Nice. Yeah, I know.
Or it wouldn't, because God would do it if it was, I don't know.
Yeah. I guess, yeah. It's interesting to think about how, it would be nice if we were told what to do. If God would just be like, yeah, this is what you need to do. But if God was going to do everything for us, it wouldn't be.
There would be
honestly,
reason to rely on Him.
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah. And also, well, if He was going to do everything for us, then I don't think Jesus would have had to die, because we wouldn't have sinned.
And I almost think that all of the problems that we ask for wisdom for are our own fault anyways.
Yeah.
Not in the sense of, like, oh, you need a place to live. Yeah, that's your fault for, like, being alive. No. But I'm saying, like, we live in a broken world.
Yeah.
Like, this whole thing is our fault anyways. Like, we had paradise and we screwed it up. And so now we are here to deal with.
Yeah, and how often do we worry about things and, like, ask God? And this is personally, I think, a thing for me, is how often am I worried about this situation, and I give this decision so much more weight than it actually has. And I'm like, okay, God, what am I going to do here? I don't want to mess this up. When at the end of the day, does it really matter that much? Like, I don't know. Sometimes I think I think too much. I give things too much weight,
Me and you are a lot alike I think in the fact that we are very logical.
Yeah.
I don't really have like a whole lot of testimonies of things where it's like God made me feel a certain way, or God did a supernatural like healing in my life, or he did.
Yeah.
I don't really have a whole lot of that. A lot of it,
Yeah.
a lot of my faith in God is from, okay, God, prove it. Like,
Yeah.
prove logically to me that you're real,
Hmm.
And so what do you think your biggest like argument, like if you were to try to argue somebody that logically God is real, like what would your argument be?
Logically, just God exists, or just arguing whether or not God exists. What is
Yes.
the most logical argument for God's existence?
Well, and like obviously like Jesus and like,
Yeah. I think I think it's really interesting when you consider. I think it was Aristotle who, was it Aristotle or was it Socrates? No, I think it was Aristotle. He had this idea. He came to this conclusion that there has to be what he called an unmoved mover. So he had this. His philosophy was that everything that is in motion had to be put in motion. So something that is moving had to have a mover. Something had to. So, for example, art has to have an artist. Everything had to be put in motion by something that was in motion. But when you follow that thought process, you realize that it kind of just goes on forever. So you think of the universe was put in motion by something or someone. Well, then what put that thing in motion? And what put that thing in motion? And it just keeps going forever. And so Aristotle was kind of like, there has to be this entity. He called it the unmoved mover. Something that was able to put things into motion, and that entity, the unmoved mover, did not have to be put into motion. They simply were there already. And the unmoved mover is not as personal as the God that we believe in, but it does have a lot of similarities. And kind of, I guess what I'm trying to touch on with that is I find it very compelling to consider that, in the sense that, people say, when you think about like the Big Bang, well, where did all we believe that nothing, we believe that something cannot come from nothing, but for whatever reason we believe that everything came from nothing at the beginning, which doesn't really make sense logically to me. And so I find that argument to be somewhat compelling, and also from a more philosophical standpoint, I find atheism to be kind of depressing. I mean, for me personally, if I was an atheist, the only I would have to be a nihilist, right? Nothing means anything. Nothing matters, because this is all. There's no higher meaning. So why am I here? Like, that's kind of depressing. I don't know. Like, even now as a Christian, there are times when I feel that, why am I doing these things? Why am I going to school? Well, so I can get a job. Well, why do I want a job? Well, so I can provide for a family. Well, why do I want to have a family? I don't know. Why do I want to have a family? Why am I doing all of this, right? And ultimately, that sort of, why that meaning comes from God, for me. And so without that, I don't know if I could do that, That's not really, that's more of a I guess pathos type argument, like emotional argument. But from a logical standpoint, I think the idea that everything came from nothing is kind of absurd. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of a cliche, like, oh, well, yeah, you're a Christian, obviously you think that. But to me, just logically speaking, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I don't know.
I heard this thing from somebody. I don't remember who. I don't remember where. Maybe I thought of it. I'll go with that because it'll make me sound smarter.
Yeah, it was me. It was me.
There was this thing, and it's this idea that we look at atheists and we go, that idea seems kind of absurd. And they look
at us the same way
and go, hey, look, you believe in a talking donkey and bears eating kids and all these crazy things. And we both look at each other and go, these wild, everything came from nothing, exploded. Both are impossible things we believe in. The real only difference is I believe the impossible came about by an intelligent mind, and they believe it just happened randomly. We both believe in the miracle and impossible. I just believe in the mind behind it.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, it really, you can't really put it much better than C.S. Lewis did, I would say. I don't know if you're familiar with his argument for Christianity, when he just essentially he says, this is paraphrasing, but he says that if Christianity is false, if there really is no God, then it's really of no importance. It doesn't really matter if you believe it or you don't. You're gonna end up in the same place. Like, it doesn't really matter. But if it is true, then it's of every importance. And so in my mind, logically speaking, so you can believe it and risk. It's essentially like you have nothing to lose by believing it, because either it's not true and you're going to end up, the result's going to be the same, or it is true and you're going to end up in a much better place. So once again, going back to C.S. Lewis, he puts it really nicely, I would say, because really, when you think about it, I mean, what do we have to lose by believing in it? Even if it's not true, I mean, and then you once again, C.S. Lewis puts the argument for Jesus really well, because historically speaking, even among atheists, I think it is an established fact that Jesus was a person who existed and who a lot of these stories about Jesus did happen, but the resurrection and the miracles and stuff are somewhat debated. And so once again, C.S. Lewis, his argument, what is it? The three, it's liar, lunatic, or Lord. Are you familiar with the argument? And so that is a really interesting way of thinking about it. It's kind of a similar, I would say, to the idea that, like, oh, what do we have to lose? Because either he's a liar, he's crazy, or what he's saying is true, right? And it really only makes sense when you consider all of these things that have come from it. I don't know. I think you can't really get much better than that. I mean, C.S. Lewis is just so articulate.
I also like what he says about morality and how morality is a baseline, and
Yeah.
Without God, there is no morality. But
Yeah.
yeah, no.
Yeah, that's a really interesting when you dig into if there is no ultimate meaning, if everything
Survival
is,
of the fittest.
yeah, why is there, like, where does morality come from? If everything just came from nothing and there is no ultimate meaning, then why, how can we establish right and wrong? It's, was it I think it was I want to say it was Jordan Peterson. I was reading 12 Rules for Life. I think that's where it was from, but it may have been, yeah, because essentially just the idea that and this could have been C.S. Lewis as well, but somebody was talking about how even if like an atheist who believes that there is no ultimate morality, if you scratch up their car, for example, if you take a key to their car and you just scratch it up, they're going to be upset. So obviously they feel wronged. And so where does that come from? You know, how can you argue that there is no ultimate morality and then turn around and be upset at me when I do something that you feel is wrong, right?
Yeah, N.D. Wilson or Nathan David Wilson in the videos Tilt-A-Whirl,
Mm-hmm.
he said, why can't I cut you up and eat you? Why can't
Yeah.
I? Atheists taste great in casserole, right? And he was just proving this point of why is it wrong? And the other day I saw a video. Y'all know who Charlie Kirk is?
Maybe.
Okay. So he goes around to campuses and talks to college kids. Him and the college kid were talking about morality, and he was asking, well, where'd it come from?
Right.
Basically talking about what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
And the student was like, well, it comes from the majority of people in the society of what they feel is right and wrong, and saying that morality comes from following society.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like saying that that's the right morality and stuff. And Charlie Kirk was like, well, what about slavery? Everybody thought that was right. Does that mean it was right?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. And you know it wasn't right because of the morality, right?
Yeah.
And so obviously it can't just come from the society and what we think and following the bandwagon of people.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for sure. Hey.
I think that's my favorite argument. I think because
The
I think if I was going to
morality argument.
It's because if I was going to debate an atheist, they can go back and forth with me all day about, oh, there's a creator, there's not a creator. Like we can go back and debate that all day.
Sure.
But what they can't debate is their own thoughts and their own feelings. And like,
yeah.
Oh, if I were to punch you, you would feel wronged.
Yeah.
If I were to take something from you, you would feel wronged.
Yeah.
Like you can't change your feelings because it's innate. Like it is just in you.
Yeah, and you're kind of forced to accept the idea that there is no objective morality, and so maybe you feel that it's wrong, but that doesn't mean I feel that it's wrong. So I can do what I want. If you're an atheist and you don't believe that there's an ultimate morality, then you're kind of forced to accept that, and not a lot of people would be willing to accept that, which I find to be pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a good discussion. I like that.
I also heard, and I don't know how true this statistic is, but that there's a big majority of atheists that it's not that they don't actually believe in God, it's that they hate God and therefore say they're atheists.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is really interesting. I do find that atheism is really kind of, it seems more of a, this is kind of what I have to believe in since I don't want to believe in God, rather than this actually makes more sense than believing in God, kind of a thing. Well, I can't believe in God, so I got to find something else, and this is the best that I can do, rather than this actually makes more sense. This actually seems more logical, you know? I think that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I'm sure that it's tough. I don't want to take too many shots at atheists because
for sure.
I know that there are a lot of areas in my life that I have a very flawed approach to.
Or perspective. Or,
Right.
You know.
Exactly.
I mean, even within like theology, like there's a lot of things I'm not well versed in. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's like, you know.
Yeah.
And like, you have to be real careful with debating somebody and also preserving their heart to be like spoken into. I think it's because I watch a lot of debates and I used to like get real into, I want to be able to win an argument.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what I've learned from watching it, I get a lot of conviction when I watch certain ones.
Mm-hmm.
Because yes, are they speaking the truth? Yes, is everything they're saying right or correct or theologically correct? Sure.
Yeah.
But then my mind goes to the verse that says, without love, it's nothing.
Yeah.
It says, you know, if you have everything but you don't have love, then you're just a clanging cymbal and a gong.
Yeah.
And it's just like, whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
So now I've got to regather myself. I've got to tell this dude with a love in their heart that like, yes, you're wrong, but in a way that's not like pushing them away.
Right.
Because if you're out there just to win an argument, then you've lost the heart of God.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really, it's an easy trap to fall into, is like, I'm going to win because I'm right. And it's, yeah, you are right, but you're not going to, I think approaching it that way, not only like you're losing the heart of God. And so now what you're doing is not, it's sort of meaningless, because you're not going to push them to be closer to God if you're approaching it from like, no, you're wrong. And like, you need to listen to me because I know what I'm talking about. I think it's really easy to fall into that, but I think it's important that we are aware of that and that we approach it from a perspective of, we're going to have a discussion, and I think it's important that we allow the other person to feel heard. And how can I help you find the truth? Not how can I win this argument?
Yeah. Because I think a lot of times, especially with people that are not necessarily atheists, but they just hate God, is a lot of times it's like, I heard this thing and it's, well, if you go to an atheist and you ask them, okay, let's say that Christianity was true. I'm not saying it is, but I'm saying if it was true, would you believe in it? Would you turn into it? Like, and some people will say yes, and some people will say no. And so at that point, it's just a heart issue. Yeah. Of like, okay, well, if you have all the evidence, if you have all of but your heart just doesn't want it, then that's this sounds like a terrible thing to say, but that's the reason that hell is a place. It's for people who like their heart, they just don't want it. They don't want to turn to God. Yeah. And so God, being a loving God, is not going to force you to be with him for eternity. And so, yeah, I think it's sometimes, I think it's definitely good to throw ideas around. I think it's good to have discussions. I think it's good to challenge each other's beliefs. Yeah. But the second that you step out of a place of love and into a place of pride and into a place of I'm right, you're wrong, and I need to put you down because you're wrong. Yeah. You lose it completely. and
Yeah.
and you lose God's like purpose behind like everything.
Yeah.
And it's just like it breaks my heart when I see that.
Yeah. Proverbs 18:2 says, "A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion." If you are approaching these sorts of discussions from the perspective of trying to express your opinion, then, I mean, you're a fool, right? It should be approached from the perspective of, I want to understand. I want to understand where you're coming from. And also, I think it's a lot of these, we have a lot of these discussions, even in the church, about doctrine and things like that, and a lot of these debates. And even those debates, I think, can be kind of dangerous. I mean, sometimes these debates that we're getting into within the church about doctrine are like, do these things really have any effect on our salvation and how we are called to live our lives? And so if not, which a lot of them really don't, why are we allowing them to cause division between us, right? And so those discussions should be approached from, because they can be beneficial if they are serving to increase our understanding. I find that sometimes having these discussions pushes me to dig more into the Word and to deepen my understanding,
Right.
so that I know where I sit on these issues. And so if you can approach these things from, I want to do this to gain understanding and to deepen my understanding, then that can be beneficial. But if you're just like, I want to make my opinion known, I want to show people that I'm right, then that's foolish, I would say.
Yeah, all the divisions in the church and like all these like different ideas that are kind of debated a lot. I kind of just go back to what Paul says about it to the early church, and he's like, don't get caught up in these useless quarrels that get you nowhere.
Right.
And really,
Exactly.
and he's saying just like basically, a lot of these things don't matter. Why are you so focused on things that don't matter? What does matter is, do you believe in him or do you not? And so it's
Right.
like, that's really the only thing you need to debate. Like,
Yeah.
and so, yeah. And I love what you said about how it can push you to get into your word more and try to understand it for yourself.
Right.
And I find that God works in that way a lot of times.
Yeah.
In my life, when I have a question, I try to go into God's word. And a lot of times I won't find it immediately, but then it just ends up like growing my faith, because it's like I learned something else.
Yeah,
Or,
for sure.
you know, and you'll remember our conversation about Zimbabwe.
Yeah, I do actually.
Yes. And we've talked about this on the podcast a lot,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
But do you remember that week where we would literally, it was like trading blows in a boxing match.
Yeah.
We were trading blows back and forth
Back
about
and
whether
forth.
this dude was going to heaven or hell.
Uh-huh.
And I thought that was a really good discussion, and I really hope that our youth gets to that point at another like philosophical like debate at some point.
Yeah.
Because I think it can be really good, like you said, to just like, because it really made us dig into the word and try to find the heart of God in
Exactly.
it and be like,
exactly.
Okay, where's this guy going?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
I think if it's as long as it's not approached from that perspective of, no, you're wrong and I'm going to prove you wrong, but hey, we disagree on this. Let's dig into the word together and see if we can get to the truth together. Then I think it's very beneficial. And I find, or when I think back about that whole discussion, I think I definitely had not dug into Romans and into those. I think Romans was the main one, but even some of the other books that we dug into, like I hadn't dug into them like that before, and so I definitely came out of that with a better understanding. Not necessarily a solid answer to the question, but a better understanding of those parts of the Bible and kind of God's heart in that. So.
And you said you wanted our youth to get back to that point. It made me think, I don't know if you heard about this, but me and him led a like question conversation small group thing at our youth. And we start this off with basically Zimbabwe, and me and Caleb are trying to kick this up and get it interesting, and people start getting involved and asking questions. It's going great, and then this lady raises her hand. We go down to get the question asked, and she asked the question to the whole youth group: should women be allowed to preach?
Ooh.
And dude, I would say it got to the almost blown.
And I will say,
okay.
I will say a thing about it. Like, we were praying about it, so obviously it was something that needed to be said or it needed to be shared.
Uh-huh.
I think it was like God given or whatever. But
Uh-huh.
I will say, the whole youth group, there was only like one that disagreed.
Okay.
One or two.
What was
Okay.
the consensus?
The consensus was actually that we have roles.
Yeah.
And that, like, I think the consensus was that, women can preach for sure, but
Okay.
women cannot pastor a church.
Okay.
That although God's word calls us to share our testimony.
Yeah.
So it's not like God doesn't want you to share your testimony if
Yeah.
you're a woman.
Right.
God needs that. God will use that.
Absolutely.
But what we're saying is that God defines roles in the Bible for men and women.
Yeah.
And to be able to lead and pastor a church is something completely different than preaching or sharing, a word of revelation or something.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we got to.
Yeah.
But also, I kind of, when we were talking about it, I didn't really prepare for that kind of question. But as
that's a tough one, dude.
Yeah, as we were getting there, I felt like I kind of got something from it, and it was that, like, when you are married to somebody, when you're joined to somebody who is a pastor of a church,
yeah,
you are also a pastor because y'all are one flesh.
Mm.
And so
Okay.
I kind of think that, like, even when we do pastor appreciation at our church, we don't ever say, just Pastor Ed. We say Pastor Ed and Christy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, now that they're one, she's also just as much a big a part as he is.
Yeah.
In leading our church. And so, yeah, I know. That's kind of where we fell on that topic. But
That's a tough one. That's a really tough one because I don't believe that God is the kind of God who would say women are not, like, what women have to say is not valuable and that they shouldn't share. But I mean, Timothy 2:12, I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over a man. That's pretty explicit. I mean, I can't just ignore that verse, right? And so I don't know that I have a perfect answer, but I think I would agree, I think, with the way that you explained it, because I can't just, because then you get into issues. If you ignore one verse,
yeah,
then
yeah, right, right,
why you can discount one verse, but the rest is true. Like, you got to either take it all or not take it at all, right? And so I can't just ignore that verse, but I also don't think God would completely discount what women have to say either.
100%.
So,
And I think just because the role of a male preacher is to be the one who speaks and to, like, speak up, I don't think that discounts the role of a woman to be, like, in prayer.
yeah.
One thing that one of the leaders at our church said, his name is Kevin. He's really a fun guy to talk to. But
Mhm.
one of the things that he said was, like, all of the prayers that a woman prayed in the Bible got answered.
Yeah.
And not all of the prayers that were prayed by men got answered.
Yeah.
And so obviously, like, God has something for women to be, like, helpful. Like, he doesn't want you to just be useless.
Right.
You don't have to be like on a stage preaching to be, like, effective for the kingdom.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so I kind of like that kind of thing about it too, is, like, even if you aren't, necessarily a pastor of a church, the role of a woman and the role that she plays in a ministry, like, is so valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find it interesting. I don't know if this is the heart of God, but I find it interesting to consider the idea that maybe the reason that he says that I do not permit a woman to teach is not because it's obviously not because women are incapable, but I think it's interesting. What if it has more to do with the idea that men are called to be leaders, and so if women are leading, that means that we as men are not stepping into our calling, and we're not doing our job. And so I find it interesting to consider that. I don't know if this is what Paul was meaning in Timothy, but I feel like it's possible that it's more of a women should not be having to teach. Like, we as men should be stepping up, and so I think that's an interesting way of thinking.
That
about
is an
it.
interesting perspective.
Because you think about what was her name, Deborah, in I think it was Deborah in Judges. There was no man was stepping up to lead. So she stepped up and led, and did a great job, right? And I think there's some nuance there, but I think to me it's tough. I don't know that that's what he's saying, but that seems to be a little bit more in line with God's character. Because I don't think he would say women are not valuable, women cannot teach, but men need to be the ones teaching. And so if women are stepping up to teach, that either means that we are being passive and just letting them step up when we need to be the ones stepping up. Actually, really, there is no other. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
And so I find that interesting, an interesting perspective.
And I also find it like y'all are qualified to talk about that because you live in a household, or you used to live in a household where your mom and your dad are the kids pastors.
Yeah.
And so I even think of like your mom and how she's led the kids ministry and how that's just, dude, multiplied, and how it's, how God has grown it and used her in such a special way. And I would find that, Michelle often is the one who pitches in more than your dad.
It's something that just occurred to me. I don't know if I've ever thought about this. It does say, I believe, and I'm gonna open it just in case. But I believe that verse that we were just talking about, it's in 1 Timothy.
I do think, my mom is the, what do you call it, labeled kids pastor. And she definitely, she goes in weekly, every day to work. And I think it's also different, though, kids pastor-wise.
Right.
Because women are literally, part of their purpose is raising the kid. They're great at that, right? And so it's a different role.
What I was going to say is this verse says, I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over a man. It doesn't say at all, right? I wouldn't say that children are not men, right? And so it doesn't say women are not to teach children or exercise authority over at all, right? It's specifically over a man, which is an interesting distinction. I don't know that I ever fully realized the fact that it specifically says over a man. So I would say that would apply to being a pastor of a church congregation with adult men, but not necessarily to teaching or exercising authority over children. Right?
I 100% agree. Yeah.
And so, that's a really tough topic, though. Very controversial.
For sure. And did you know that my parents, before China and all that stuff, were youth pastors? Did you know that? They were youth pastors at Cornerstone for a little bit.
Not for very long, I don't think, but yeah, for a little while.
Super cool.
Yeah.
So, kind of get a little bit. So, what do you think? Like youth pastors then? Because they're not necessarily children anymore. I mean, there's a certain part of ignorance that you lose, especially in today's culture.
For sure.
It's like you lose that, and it's becoming younger and younger, the age where you lose this ignorance and yes. And
so when does, I guess,
where's the line? Is it 18 or is it, I guess I guess the kind of question then is like, when does a child become a man?
Become a man, yeah.
Because that's really the cutoff.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't know if I would, like, I don't know if I have a good answer, but I'm more inclined to be a little bit more uncomfortable with a female youth pastor. But I don't know. That's tough.
I'll say number one, I think the step from a child to a man is different for everybody. Number two is me and you went to a youth camp last year. And let's be honest, Caleb. Let's be honest. We both stepped in there and saw that the speaker was a woman and both went,
Okay, let me tell you. Okay. First, okay. All right. To start, we walked in, okay? And I walk in and we sit down. All right, great. Worship goes. Amazing, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we sit back down. And the dude is getting up there talking and he's going, all right, and so now we're welcoming a pastor, or who's it was a speaker evangelist, I think was her title or whatever. And first of all, she's married to another guy who's a pastor of the church, but she's an evangelist. Okay.
Right.
And so I guess she just goes and speaks at conferences and camps and certain things.
Uh-huh.
Anyways, he says that, and she gets up on stage, and I look at Gabe, and I go,
Hey, hang on.
Like, wait a sec. Anyways, she was great. She had a lot of things to say that I still like have in a journal that it was super powerful. Anyways, but yes, I agree. I kind of get like a little uncomfortable with that, and I'll get to that in a second. But we walked out, me and Gabe, and Bryce was there too, and we.
Oh no.
And we all, I walked with Gabe, and I'm talking with him, and I'm going, what do you think about that? And Bryce kind of comes along, and he's like, yo, that's not right, or something like that. And I was like, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
At the beginning, we were all like, me and him were looking at each other, and all of a sudden, like, you could tell we were almost judging.
Yeah.
Anyway, from the beginning.
Yeah.
And then the last day we're leaving, and we actually talked about, we were like, at the beginning, we looked at it and we were like, but at the end, dude, she was an amazing speaker.
Yeah.
She did really good.
That's the thing is like you also, I think it's dangerous to
be closed-minded.
Yes. Because you don't have to agree with her being in that role of a teacher. It doesn't necessarily mean that she should be teaching. I don't know if I agree with that or not. But that also doesn't mean that she has nothing valuable to say, or that I can't learn from something that she is saying, right? I think you're kind of doing yourself a disservice by completely closing. Oh well, she shouldn't be teaching. Maybe she shouldn't. Maybe not. But completely closing yourself off to anything that she has to say, I think you're kind of doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to like a place of love. I mean, because we kind of walked in and we were like, I don't know about this. But like, and then as the nights went on, I was just like constantly just like more excited for it. It was like, dude, and what kind of bars is she gonna drop tonight or whatever? And because she had some good ones. I mean, there's some off the top of my head that I can think of right now, and even like you might even relate to this one. She said something about how she was talking about the prodigal son, and she was talking about the brother.
Okay.
Not the guy who ran away, but the brother.
Right.
And she says when he gets back and the brother's pissed. I mean, he's
Yeah.
like, dude, how are you going to throw a party for this guy? And
What
I've
the
been
heck?
with you the
Yeah.
whole time or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
And she goes, you can live in the father's house, but then lose the father's heart.
Yeah.
And I sit there and I'm like, bro.
Bro. Yeah.
Dude, it was like a wave of conviction almost. Because it was like, how many times have I done that?
Yeah.
How many times am I sitting in God's house, you know, with all these blessings that he's given me, you know, knowing the truth, and then I look around and I'm like, you know, pissed that somebody else is getting healing. Or you can't tell me that you've ever been jealous that somebody else has gotten a move of God.
Yep.
And you haven't. It's all human nature. And I sit there in my chair and I'm like, okay, she's legit.
Okay. All right. Yep.
And then I repented.
Yeah.
No, but that was super powerful. She was a blessing, but yeah. Some
That's
theological debating here.
That's tough. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I have a good answer. It's one of those
You're gonna pull
things.
a cliff. I do not know.
Yeah. You know, it's not always bad to admit that you don't know.
Yeah.
Not always a bad thing. And, you know, I also think about, I don't know that this is quite the same thing because this is not specifically what the verse is talking about, but kind of like we were talking about, I think earlier today about Ecclesiastes when he talks about like there are certain things about God that we just can't understand, can't know, just not going to happen, right? In the same way, I think it's kind of comforting to be able to realize that, you know what, I don't know everything, and I'm not gonna know everything, and that's why God is God, and I'm not. I don't have to carry that because I can't, right? You know, so it can be frustrating at times, but I think it can also be kind of comforting to just realize, you know what, I don't have to try because it's not going to work. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to understand that. And sometimes that's how it goes.
Well, before we end it out, I want two things. Number one, I want you to answer a question of what's your favorite book in the Bible.
Ooh.
And kind of why. And then, to wrap it all up, whatever you want to say, if there's something you want to say, if there's a funny story you want to tell, a serious story you want to tell, whatever it may be.
Okay.
Whatever you want to share. And then Caleb will wrap us up.
Well, so favorite book of the Bible. That's a tough one. That kind of feels like heresy almost to have, but also I guess not really. I would say I really do like Ecclesiastes. I think for me personally, as somebody who's very logical and analytical and who sometimes struggles with the idea that, you know, kind of what we were talking about earlier, like, what is the meaning of life? Why am I here? Why am I doing these things? And for the Bible to kind of be like, yeah, you know what? It really doesn't mean anything. And it's kind of like, oh, dang, you know, like it really doesn't. And it's kind of encouraging for the Bible to say that and to kind of realize, you know, it doesn't really mean all that much. So just fear God, keep his commands, enjoy what you have, because God has given it to you. I really find there's a verse in Ecclesiastes 2, I think. Let me see if I can find it. I remember reading it a while back and being pretty convicted. It says, there is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God, for apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? I really like also the footnote in my translation says, instead of find enjoyment in his toil, it says, make his soul see good in his toil. There's nothing better for me than to make my soul see good in my work, even when I don't want to be doing it, or even when I don't like my job, right? Even when I'm scrubbing floors this summer, or cleaning carpets, or waxing, or cleaning windows, like, there's nothing better for me than to make my soul see the good in that work, because God has provided that. And that was pretty convicting.
Can I add on to that a little bit?
Go for it.
So there's another verse in Ecclesiastes, and I believe it's 5, and it talks about kind of the same thing about enjoyment and joy. It says, but he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. And bro, that God dropped that one on me, and I was like, whoa. And
Whoa.
and that had been my prayer for a while. And it was just like, God, I need you to fill me with joy where I don't see the days going by, because I believe it's also in Ecclesiastes where it says the days are evil.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if we're seeking God and we're finding enjoyment in what God has given us and what he's got us doing, we're not going to see all these evil things and the evil day. We're just going to skip on right by, because God keeps us occupied with joy in our heart.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyways, continue.
So yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. I really like. There's a lot of really good wisdom, I think, in Ecclesiastes. I also really like Proverbs. I like Solomon's, a lot of his writings. But if I had to pick one, I would say probably Ecclesiastes. I really like the way that he boils it down at the very end. What does he say? Very end of Ecclesiastes, he says, "The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man." That's it. Fear God, keep his commandments.
Just summed up the whole thing.
Yeah. So
would you believe me if I told you when I got interviewed by Gabe, I said the same thing, that in the Old Testament, I gave him 2.
Okay.
I kind of cheated.
Oh.
I said Old Testament and New Testament, my favorite books. And
yeah,
Old Testament was Ecclesiastes and Proverbs.
Yeah.
So I told you
we
were logically minded. I'm telling you.
What can I say?
They say great minds think alike. But
I know. I guess
hopefully my mind will be as great as yours someday.
I know. I'm sure it will. But story.
Or you're thinking of a story, and we're talking about great minds. I literally think you have used 5 times as big of words as we usually use in our podcasts in this one. Like, you were just saying so many things, like, oh, pathos and this and that and this and that. And Caleb's over here like, what bars is she gonna have next?
That's really funny. No, I was talking to Mom about that. She's always like, where do you get all these words, right? I'm telling you, man. I've been reading more of this right here. This is you guys can't see it if you're listening.
That is a thick book.
This is The Greatest Adventures of Sherlock Holmes.
How many pages is that?
It's like
too many.
Almost 1,000.
Oh my God.
And the print is really small too. But I was reading this just like yesterday, I think, and I read a paragraph, and there were like 5 words that I looked up in one paragraph that I didn't know. Like, reading stuff like this is how I learn new words. So what can I say?
That book is so big you could get a pump with it. Okay.
You could. Okay.
But about his big words, one of my favorite stories to tell about him is I was hanging out with somebody, and me and him, I don't know if he called me or I called him or something, talked about something, and I was like, okay, I'll see you later. I'm hanging out with whoever. And he goes, oh, okay, give them my best regards. And I was like,
What's wrong with that?
bro, who says that? Like, only him.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
He's
Yeah,
just
well.
a distinguished gentleman.
I'm
And him and his,
twisting
Y'all
my
can't see
imaginary
him.
mustache right now.
y'all can't see him, but if you know Elijah, he looks very good with a fedora on.
What can I say? I can neither confirm nor deny the truth of that statement. Anyways, story. I'm trying to think of if I have a good college story.
Yes, please drop one on us. Can be a stupid story or it can be a serious story.
I guess. Were you gonna say something? I don't know if you guys want to actually use this story or not, but it's probably one of my favorite college experiences.
Oh, it's going in there.
So we had once a semester they do what's called like open house. They'll do a night for like a couple hours where women are allowed into the men's dorm and then vice versa on a different night. And so this was right after men's open house. So there were girls in our dorm and they all left. And for whatever reason, my two roommates had a bunch of these, they had this friend group with a bunch of girls that they would hang out with. And they would congregate outside our window because we were in the basement, and so our windows were like ground level. Like the bottom of the window was like the ground, right? Because we're in the basement. And so they would congregate outside our window and talk to us. Like they would be hanging out, and then we would go back to our room for the night for whatever reason they would follow us, and then they would hang out outside the window. This had been happening several times at this point. And so they were there for open house, and they left right after open house. This is 10 o'clock. The doors are closing. No more women allowed in the dorm. So they kick them out. They leave, and they come straight to our window. And so they're hanging out, talking at our window. And the window that they are standing at has full view of the door to our room. And one of my buddies from the basement walks into the doorway in his underwear. And he's like, you guys want to take a shower? And he sees the girls in the window, and he just like stands there for a good like 2 seconds. And then he's like, oh, he like takes off. And that was like that's 2 seconds of like me and my roommates are like looking back and forth, like processing what's happening. Is this real? Like these two different worlds are just like smashing into each other right now. And we were all on the floor laughing. Like we were dying. And we look up, the girls are gone. Needless to say, they never visited our window again after that. So solved that problem. But that was an experience. I don't think I had laughed that hard. I still don't know if I've laughed that hard in a while. That was pretty good.
Dude, I bet that dude was so embarrassed.
I mean, he's actually the kind of guy that was like, yeah, that was embarrassing, but you know what? What the heck? You know, like, he's pretty.
That would have been pretty awful.
Was that my guy Judah?
That was not. No, that was not Judah. Yeah.
Shout out Judah.
He would have though. I would, you know.
He would have done it on purpose to show his rock hard abs. I'm kidding. I've never seen the dude.
What is that? Okay, that
Judah, we've never seen you, but we love you. Come on the pod.
No, dude, he's actually so cool.
Play us a song or something.
Oh wait, another story. If you guys, I don't know if when we did Battle of the Bands, yeah, my buddy Gabe, who's one of our guitar players, not this Gabe, he smashed his guitar after the first Battle of the Bands.
I think I did hear about that.
And then he did it again. He did it again this year. He smashed another guitar. It's I guess it's just a thing
How
now.
many dollars down the drain?
He actually, I think he bought that one for like,
Smashing purposes.
yeah, it was pretty cheap. It was actually like not a full size guitar. It was a little bit smaller. I also had tearaway pants for Battle of the Bands. Yeah, we did like he introduced all the bandmates between songs, and he's like, and we got Elijah Neal on bass. Rip, and so that was a lot of fun. I had shorts on underneath. Okay, it's not like I,
Okay.
flashed everybody.
If I can find a good video or something, I will cue right now a video of him smashing a guitar on the
Okay,
podcast.
yeah,
If
yeah.
I can find one. We'll see.
That would be sick.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Well, Elijah,
Thank you guys for having me. This was fun.
it's been really fun. A lot of good conversations.
Yeah.
I mean, like deep conversations too.
Yeah.
Solid.
A lot of
And I
fun.
learned a couple things about Elijah.
Yeah?
I don't know if Gabe did because it's his brother,
Well.
but Well, Elijah, we love you. Hopefully,
Love you too,
we'll
guys.
get you on the
This was fun.
podcast again at some
Heck
point,
yeah.
and we'll see y'all next time.